is I'm just going to invite y'all to introduce yourself by institution, there's some institutional groups here. So West Georgia's got a couple of folks here, and Gwinnett has some folks here, and then the rest of y'all just introduce yourselves, and then sort of talk about where you are in the process of developing the Data 1500 course. And I want to make sure at the start that we don't have a dog in this fight. This is really about making, this course is an option that's available for campuses to use, but we aren't advocating that it be done today or next month or fall or spring. So knowing when you're planning on it, if you're planning on it, offering Data 1501, and then sort of where you are in that development process would be great. And I'm just gonna, because he had the misfortune of being first on the call, Dr. War, can I ask you to kick us off with an introduction of yourself and then sort of where you are in your thinking of the 1501 course?
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Dr. Robert Stephen Owar. I'm from Albany State University, and we have just started the curriculum process for the approval of Data Science 1501, and we hope to approve it before the fall semester. But if we don't get everything approved, we certainly hope to approve it in time for the spring semester. And we are planning for students to take this course, first of all, to do the statistics course, the 1401, and then after that, do the 1501, the data science course. But for those who have done AP statistics in high school, we can straight away take them into the data science course. So that's where we are, and hopefully by spring we shall get started. Thank you.
I can go next if nobody else volunteers. So my name is Paul Mihale. I'm from Valdosta State University in the computer science department. We have Data 1501 approved for the fall of 2021. So this fall is it's already on the books. It's in the system. It's approved on every level. What I want to pitch in this discussion is I just came from a meeting with the advisors from the College of Humanities and Social Sciences, and it was interesting to hear their questions. So this is a non-major class, right? Non-computer science or math class, and they're interested as far as who could take it, what they're going to get out of it, what the selected topic list is, and all of those details. And I'm working with a faculty from the math department to jointly develop this, since the computer science department alone will not be able to staff it should this grow into multiple sections. We can't hire adjuncts, basically, and they're not going to give us a tenure track line just for this. So one of the questions was how, since we're not requiring any prerequisites, what type of, what kind of knowledge will a student need? And we're designing the course with no assumptions whatsoever for students who come in. No roadblocks to get into this course. And I refer to it as data literacy more so than the data science. Because it's really just scraping the surface of a lot of fields, of a lot of topics, right? And that's our approach to designing it. So we selected, myself and my math colleagues selected a subset of the topics listed in those forms that were passed around. I'm very bad with paperwork, so I don't know which form was which, but one of them had a list of topics. And we essentially selected topics, and in fact, I should have that paper here. So we have three basic categories of topics: basic, data visualization, and analysis. And in the initial topics list from the USU forms, I didn't see any of that. So we did that categorization, and we selected some basics from each. And the idea was, and the selling point for the College of Humanities and Social Sciences was to have this course be useful to them, to their students, and to have not necessarily one of those math intensive, here's how principal component analysis works, or here's how quadratic programming works, but instead, here's some tools that you may be able to use in the future. So that was our approach. And we're expecting, again, 30 or less students for the fall. So is that kind of what you're expecting,
Yeah,
Jonathan?
and so, and you're on for you have it on in inventory for the fall. You've scheduled a.
Yes, it's
a single
approved
section.
on every level. I don't know what the systems are called, but the ones that do the check marks for areas, area D and all that, like the whole stack of approvals has been done.
Congratulations.
Thank you. They're very quick and very efficient to do that. So I'm very happy with the administrators and all the work that they've done.
And if I'm understanding correctly, you were just coming out of a conversation with advisors or with program
Yes,
departments?
with advisors. So advisors are the ones who actually sign up the students for the class, and they're really important to inform, here's what this class is, here's what this class isn't. Because anytime, and I hate to say it that way, but anytime a social science student hears math or science, then they assume certain things that may not be true for this particular class. And I wanted to clarify that with the advisors. And yeah, good.
And just one follow-up. So, and I'm not sure I'm 100% familiar. I think I know your advising model pretty well. You have advisors who advise for like you have advisors who have advising responsibilities for psychology or criminal justice or social science.
That's exactly right. Right. So each college has a head advisor, I think is what they're called. And they have several advisors that report to them that are responsible for subsets of departments, depending on the size of the college. So for example, the College of Science and Math has, I think, 3 or 4 advisors. Or maybe less than that because we're only 5 departments. I think 2 advisors. I'm pretty sure there's 2. But humanities and social sciences has more. And they're all at this meeting. I think there were 7 or 8 people there total.
Great.
And psychology seemed to be interested more so than anybody else in this. But this is just a, anecdote. I mean, that, I don't know. So I'm curious to see like what others are doing as far as developing their own versions and customizing it per university. So that's kind of what I was hoping to hear out of this. Well, extra on top of the agenda.
All right, that's perfectly in line. Before we get to that, so I'm looking here to Dr. Drake or Tripp or somebody from West Georgia Tim want to give us an idea where y'all are with the course?
Sure, I'll start off and then I'll let each of them chime in as needed because we've broken off and we've divided and conquered with some of the work related to it. But first thing I want to say is that we are in line with Radu and that we are designing the course as if we're making no assumptions about their knowledge as well. We felt like some of the and we shared our redesign, or not our redesign, our small modifications with Jonathan, and he gave us the green light with that. But that took a couple of meetings just to talk about how can we design this course in a way where it will meet our needs and our students' needs. So that was one of the phases, was taking what was there and making it fit for our institution, still within the parameters and within the purity of the course as intended. So we agreed upon that. We got the green light for that. With our curriculum system, if it's not done by a certain date, everything, we use Curriculog. I don't know if some of you do, but if it's not approved by a certain time, it gets completely wiped out of the system because you got to pull to the catalog and all of that. So we're not at we're not at a place where we can get it through the whole system. So when we last met, we said we're just going to have to put it in for the fall. We had a conversation about whether I would treat it as if it was like a GFA course, or if it was a eCampus course where we can have an expedited approval process. But we decided against that because our campus, we really want buy-in and we want full-fledged discussion and all of that. And Winston has led some discussions about not just this course, but about a pathway, about data literacy. We're having those larger conversations about how do our programs really incorporate and move the meter on that, because we're not there yet, and we need to have the larger conversation across programs, across certificates. We have a couple of certificates, but they're embedded now. We want to make them stand alone. So this course is getting caught up in a much grander conversation. And I think that may be causing us to move a little slower in getting it through. But I feel confident that we will be able to have the course on the books in the spring. And I believe that we for sure have at least one certificate where the course makes a logical fit. There could and should, in my opinion, be other places for it. We've been talking to faculty because, just like Sebastian was saying, we don't have the faculty to teach it, right? And so, when we're limited with our part-time individuals, so who's teaching it and where it's going to fit, I just think that we are having broad conversations, and I'll leave it at that. But I know Winston's been doing a lot of meeting with the other campus partners about the larger conversation about data literacy and data science. And Tim is, of course, over our general ed department. And so, putting it in there. Gentlemen, do you have anything that I've left off or that you'd like to discuss?
I guess I was just going to say that I think that we are we're definitely doing what sounds like what Valdosta is interested in doing, and sort of developing an inclusive kind of approach, it sounds like. So we do have the computer science and math folks who do want to go with sort of a data science-y approach, and they're going in that direction, and that's great. We want to encourage them to use this course or whatever else to go there. So like a calculus-based hard kind of data science-y approach. And then something like this, we were sort of thinking of this as maybe a way to think about, and Tim can talk about that, inviting a lot of students into this process, because I think a lot of our folks could benefit from it in the social sciences, humanities, College of Business, possibly some nursing folks. Like, we really want to give them a chance to kind of do a data analytics kind of a thing. And so we were looking at this as a standalone invitation into that. We looked up some, some freeware type things that they can use, so our students can have access to all of these sort of things, so that it's not software dependent, and to just make it as accessible as possible to people who come in. Because like you were saying, a lot of social science, I'm a sociologist, so I know a lot of social science folks for sure hear data and they run away, or math, and so giving them a chance to say, oh, this isn't so bad, let's take a look at this, because I think it's just going to help with all of the degrees down the road with their job placement.
So I just wanted to add something to your conversation here. Once we had everything pushed through the approval pipelines, the powers that be, the College of Business came kind of yelling and saying, oh, you cannot have the prefix data because we wanted it. And there's conversations between the College of Business, one of their faculty who teaches, who's proposing to teach something very similar, but I guess more for the business side of things. And our department head and the deans, and the consensus was, well, we can both use data. What's the problem with that? But it took many meetings, hours that we'll never get back, to establish that.
Yeah,
So
we started our conversations with business because they had one of the certificates that had data in the title, and so that was a starting place. And I'm not sure. I mean, I believe we've made some progress, but we're still pulling them along with that. Who owns what, and and again, go ahead.
So for us, it was just we both can use it as long as the number's different. What's the issue? So we all said, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, it's an interesting point too, because when we started looking, there were no data prefix. Like, one of the reasons why we landed on data 1501 was there were no data courses under 4,000 when we pulled the catalog in fall. So, I mean, fair game, they can do it later and they can do it locally, and that's fine, but we would have seen it in fall. So they haven't, there's some upper division data, but nothing in the lower division. So when you said, I want to make sure, so you said that, because of the curriculum thing, this is West Georgia, that you're thinking it's like spring. Is that spring 2021, 2022 is when you think it'll be, the process will be in place?
Yes, because our undergraduate committees are not meeting over the summer that I'm aware of. I mean, if they are, right now the plan is for them not to meet.
That-
And so, go ahead.
That's fine. I want to make sure
Yes, that's correct.
spring
Well, it should
2022,
be
so
no
it'd be available for students in fall of 2022 as a course.
Correct.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking.
I think we can get it through the approval process in the fall so it can be offered in the spring. But the catalog won't be updated because we don't update our catalog twice a year. We only update our catalog once a year.
Right, makes sense. Okay, perfect. Gwinnett, who would like to start?
Hi, this is Xin Shu from Georgia Gwinnett College. Nice to be here and hearing all the different progress from different colleges and universities. So here at Georgia Gwinnett, I think, Sebastian, you correct me if I didn't get it right. I think we got the approval, and the most recent update we heard is that we are waiting for the last step, the provost approval, and then we'll be in banner, and we're gonna start with the promoting and everything. So we are currently planning on having 2 sections, and Sebastian and I each will be teaching 1 section in fall. So that's our current plan. And we had conversation about what we should cover and to which extent, because obviously there's some overlapping with statistics and and all those kind of things. So currently we were trying to figure out exactly the topics, the content, how are we going to differentiate? Since we don't require any prereq, it's going to be placed in area D. So, exactly how are we going to proceed from there? And we were trying to get in some feedback from faculty such as social science and psychology and see how they perceive, how they want to vision this course and what they think are the most important skills for their student when they took upper level courses. So that's kind of our current status. Anything else, Sebastian, you want to add?
I'll say it. Someone fancy said that this course would happen in the fall, and that allowed us to put the cart in front of the horse. So like approval was pretty much guaranteed to happen, even if it's still actually going through it. Somebody said it will be offered in the fall. So for example, we don't even have data as a listed discipline on the web interfaces yet. You couldn't even search for a data course if you wanted to, but we're told there will be 2 sections in the fall. And yeah, it's somewhere in the approval process, but someone high up has said there will be 2 sections in the fall. So we're ready.
Are you happy? Are you happy about that, or is that a problem?
Oh, I'm fine with it. But I say GGC has a couple interesting things. One, we'll be teaching it fully within the iTech discipline. 2, there's no prerequisites, but we are also rolling the Math 1401 course out to our freshmen. So it's hard to see whether or not, since there isn't a dependence, it's hard to see how they play together. And 3, GGC has as its area B option a different iTech course, General Computer Literacy. And although it's not a prerequisite, the majority of our students will have taken that. My big question that I would like to talk more about today is Excel. Like, how much am I going to try and use Excel in this course? Is that the best bang for the buck in terms of non-majors who go on to psychology and other things? I'm an IT professor. I'd like to do some more advanced stuff like Python and pandas and all kinds of other things. So that's what I'm looking to get out of the meeting.
That's great. That was a big part of this morning's conversation too. And again, I'll note that there's a recording of that so you can hear that conversation. And Dr. Chattery.
Yes. So I'm Avi Chaudhary from Savannah State University Math Department. When our provost charged this committee, so we have created a 6-person committee from representative from all 4 colleges. We had just 2 weeks times to get it to NPCC, the new program curriculum committee. and they had a deadline like January 31st. So in order to include that for fall curriculum, and there is no way we could meet that because we need from department, from college, from all these things. So we didn't take that chance or didn't even try to do that. So we are in the process of creating the syllabus actually. And we are shooting for fall 2022 because that's we cannot start it in spring. The issue about the data course code, we already have everything because we already have data analytics certificates, and we have personnel to teach it because all the faculties, including me, teaching the data analytics certificate courses, they will be teaching it for the time being. And the problem with I think that should be an approval process should not be a problem because I am hearing about the business department problem. So everything from that, we actually took it to the math department. So I'm actually in charge of it. So, and business department people are actually my friend in the committee. So there shouldn't be any problem in this sense. And I have all the kind of all the backup from the deans and the provost. So approval process should not be a problem, but I want to do it in such a way so that we have done a lot of marketing for the data analytics certificate. So we have created a basically research capacity, data literacy in the campus. So I'm pretty sure that we can attract a lot of students in this course. But my main concern, and I have said it to the committee also, that so we have to make this as a data literacy course. We cannot really make it very math heavy, a stat heavy course. Otherwise, there is no way, especially we are in this area of Chatham County, it's very difficult to attract students because we are having problem with the math programs. So that's where we are struggling right now, if you say. I think I covered everything. Anything else, Jonathan?
That's perfect. That's actually spot on. And I will note, so you've mentioned and others have mentioned like course approval. Actually, I just got an email just now from Sabrina Hessinger at Georgia Southern, who would be here with us, but she's actually just been called into the curriculum committee for the second time to get this course approved. So, you know, GGC's experience where somebody says this will be done and this is done is perhaps the opposite that they're facing here. So that's interesting. So let's go ahead and jump back to this conversation. So there's two questions that I heard in this review. One is about this idea of how do you build the course for departments? Like how do you tailor this for different audiences, or are you tailoring for different audiences? That's one. And the other is this idea of, oh, I'm sorry, I totally skipped Georgia State. And Georgia State actually, from what I hear, is looking more towards where I think Valdosta State is looking in the data literacy end. No, West Georgia. Sorry about that. Rafal, do you want to give us an introduction and update?
Sure. I'm Rafal Angrick. I came late. I clicked on the wrong link and I've been in the 10 a.m. session. And we, to put it bluntly, not planning to move much on data 15 next year. And the reason for this is we have our master's degree in data science and we're starting with the bachelor's degree in data science. So we're just delaying the whole process for a year. I could just maybe comment from time to time on the solutions we implemented in some other levels. Maybe that would be helpful, but there will be no real progress on developing a course.
Okay. So with that as context, I guess, and I'm trying to think. So where we are. So it doesn't sound like, again, this conversation around customizing for different audiences. I mean, I'm not sure anyone's really gotten too far down that line. I'll tell you, in the morning session, it didn't really come up much at all. It came up as a conversation between departments, but it was not as much. It was not entirely clear whether there was engagement. So I guess I'm curious about either how you're approaching it or if you've done any work on that. And if not, then this becomes an open question for the community.
I can start this conversation. So here at VSU at Valdosta, we approached this as a collaboration between the computer science and the math departments. And it's super interesting to get one of me and the math faculty side by side and see what happens. And what happened out of that is both of us budged along and converged, which is very rare to see in academia in general. And what we ended up converging on was, like Sebastian was saying, I think whether to use Excel or Python, what I've done is I've demoed a quick demo to my math colleague, Google Colab. Are you all familiar with that?
Yes.
So Google Colab is interactive Python, free for everybody who has a Google account, and it has like some resource limited notebooks there. But the cool thing is there's zero software prerequisites. There's no installations of anything required. There's nothing other than the web browser that you need. And another cool thing about that is you can do something really useful. And again, I'm not defining what useful means, and people can argue over that, but you can do something really useful in 2 or 3 lines of code, as opposed to Excel, where you need to navigate, menu items and, clicking on cells and understanding what formulas are and all that stuff. So both of these approaches, you need to understand, you need some foundation, right? But the idea for literacy, for us, at least what we decided on was, here are some recipes. Here's a cookbook of things you can do. Here's where you typically will use these, and here's how to do it. As opposed to digging very deeply under the hood to show, like, here's how regression works, and here's how optimization works, and here's what list comprehension is in Python, because then you'll blow them up. You can't do that, especially at an incoming freshman who has probably not had any exposure to college classes in general, let alone any notions of math. So again, we took the idea of literacy, of giving them the idea that these tools exist, and information to look up more on their own in the future. Does that kind of make sense? And as far as Sebastian, if we have decided on Excel and Python, I think we're going to do both.
So Paul, I had a quick question actually, and thank you for sharing. It's good to see that people are working with math. I hang out with math people, but this is not our situation. Did you say Math 1401 was a prerequisite to your Data 1501?
No, it's not. It's not.
And so when you're working with the math faculty, how are they, are you guys talking about that topic? Like, you've got a bunch of students who probably want to take 1401. Do you hope they take both courses? Do you hope
there was historical conversation about developing, or this is on their end, developing a 1501. And then they were saying, oh, this Data 1501 could take the place of that course. And yet, the USG, for this rack, it seems that there shouldn't be any prerequisites, and we went that route.
I guess my question is, have your math faculty already been teaching Math 1401 a while, or is it also a new
Yes, no, they've been doing it for a long time. And in fact, the person who I'm working with, Andreas Lazari, I don't know if you know him, he's taught it before, and he said, okay, well, there's overlapping topics. So we talked about all of that, all of those things. And this is how we converged on the list that we have, and what we're going to do in each, and the assignment format and the examining format, the tests and all that stuff. Like, there's a lot of things that we need to consider for an incoming freshman who's barely, surviving in college. That's going to be our target audience.
But right. It's area D, right? It's an area D course.
It's an area D, right? So from this morning's conversation with the advisors, we have dedicated advisors. Every time I'd say, light on math, and basically, I wouldn't say easy, but light on math and practical. So those two words triggered a lot of notes, right? You know, when people take notes, they're like, oh, there's something there.
Because I think there's something different between an incoming freshman and Area D. At least in my school, incoming freshmen are blocked into blocks of courses, and those blocks typically have Area A stuff, maybe Area B, and maybe an Area C, but they're like a prepackaged program. Here's your pre-nursing block. This will get you started with the right math and a couple things along that degree. And my question now is, does Data 1501 fit into incoming freshman blocks?
Well, I guess for the College of Humanities and Social Sciences, it does, because otherwise the advisors wouldn't have said, oh, is this, you know, useful? Can this be offered to an incoming freshman? And again, this comes from me. I've never done advising. So,
all of our other Area D courses have prerequisites, our chemistries and other things. There are prerequisites there.
And I was also asked about the lab component. And that's another thing that I wanted to ask this group. Are you all planning to offer it with a dedicated lab with a separate grade, or is this all in one contained? The fact that you do it in a computer lab does not mean it's a lab, right? How are people doing this?
I was assuming I'd be teaching it in a room with computers.
No, but I'm asking about the different lab component. That's a separate section, you know, with different CRN.
Like
I haven't heard about that from anyone so far. That there's not a separate lab from the courses. So I haven't heard anybody saying they're going to do that. And a couple of people who are launching it in the fall, I know are not, that they're just not offering the course as the course. Sebastian, with respect to y'all's blocks, I mean, that is actually a conversation about to maybe have with Karen Jackson and them and advising about, you know, where does this fit? Because that actually affects both whether you have takers and whether you have takers fall semester too. And that would be, you know, that would be a conversation in the same way that Paul's conversations with his advisors. I mean, I think that Paul, the way you pitched it is what I heard this morning too, is like, this is the way this is a course about applications as opposed to statistics, which is a course about understanding the statistical operations, and that this is a way to think about data science. This is the way data science thinks. So they're sort of separate but overlapping magisteria of topics. But I think, Sebastian, you do raise a really important point that maybe, I mean, it's more local, but again, there are places where Area D courses don't have prerequisites. So there's a number of places where your Area D may be only requiring exemption from learning support. There may be places where it would require a satisfaction of Area A2. I know at least one institution went ahead and went through the full-on review process because they wanted to have an Area A2 requirement for this course, like just satisfying Area A2. I'd be really careful about that, not because I just disagree with it, but if a student takes college algebra, they've really not been they're not doing anything in college algebra that's actually preparing them for data science, looking at the topics list. So it'd be, you know, there's a question in my mind whether you're putting a roadblock in front of it, but reality is most students are probably going to take this in the spring if they're taking the math in the fall. But it'd be a conversation to have, I think, with your advising and with your departments about where it fits in their program maps. Because again, if this is the thing they want them to have in their wheelhouse, in the student's wheelhouse, the student should have some exposure to data science. At some point, the conversation then says, well, when is it right for a psychology student? When is it right for a criminal justice student? When is it right for a student who's looking at, and equally, if a student is actually going towards that major pathway, when do we want them to see this course, or do we want them to see this course? So let me ask you a question. So we had a bit about Excel and Python, and it was, I want to make sure I captured what the tool was. Was it
Google Collab?
Google Collab.
Yeah, COLAB. So it's google.research or collab.research.google.com.
You can just search as a Google Collab.
It's still a Python though, right? The language is a Python. Collab
Yes,
is
Python.
Python.
Python. It's yeah, interactive Python.
And in it, are they sort of, it's guided Python? It's not, it's guardrails, right? I mean, they're not having to code it out in the same, or is it programming? Is it a programming space?
It's a programming space.
It's just programming environment, right? You're still programming in Python. It's just you don't have to fight with installations and writes and all that
Yeah,
crap.
that's right. And then it also has all of the major tools already installed. So you don't have to do anything. You have to do any weightlifting before you can do something useful. And that's critical for this course, because you want to show something in 3 or 4 lines that's useful, in my opinion.
So how does it work with big data files? For example, I've played with a website called repl.it, which is also like a web-based Python interface, but you cannot upload a big data file to that thing, not without paying them money at the very least.
Yeah, so it depends. You have to define what big means, but Google put time restrictions on their sessions. So you can't run a job more than 3 hours or whatever, then you have to pay. And as far as space is concerned, it's connected to the Google Drive. So whatever Google Drive's limits are, that's what your limits are for space. The default free account, I don't know, I think it's 5 gigs or something, but I mean, we wouldn't think about using data sets more than, you know, a few thousand data points anyway. Like plenty to just do a wget, here's the file from online. You don't have to do anything from like download anything and then upload and select files, because that's just more failure points along the way.
So
Does that kind of make sense?
It does. I mean, certainly 5 gigs is an enormous data set, but I have a project in another class that has a 100 megabyte Twitter file with a few million tweets in it.
Yeah, 100
Enjoy
megabytes
it.
is nothing for Collab. It's like peanuts.
People had a different kind of thought on that. So we were thinking about this at West Georgia with incoming freshmen in mind who would have no experience with stats, no experience with programming, and it would probably be terrified by both. And so we were trying to think about how we could make that accessible, knowing that they're going to eventually need to get there, but we want to, you know, bring them in so that they're excited about it when they hit it. And so I think that, and I personally tend to use R, and I know that there's sometimes Python, but sometimes there's some options to make that more accessible. I even kind of felt like that would be a lot for some of the students that we'd want to be targeting. And so I'll have to look into that when I hadn't heard of that particular thing before. But here is some freeware. I'll put this in the chat that we had looked at using. So this is gonna be kind of a black box approach. They're not going to see any coding. They're not going to see anything like that. But that would be one way to do it. I think Excel also can scare people with formulas, because we're very much imagining social science students like criminologists, sociologists, people who would be very much interested in people, not so much in numbers. So I think this would be the way to get them to see, like, look, the numbers aren't quite so scary after all. And here's a way to get your feet wet with some of the statistics with a lot of training wheels on. And then they would have to, you know, to do anything meaningful with it, you're going to have to get them deeper in somewhere down the road. But I think with people who are coming in with zero background, we sort of felt like this might be a good way to go, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point, because obviously you can scare GGC as an open access institution. There's plenty of fear around math. But on the other hand, a psychology professor was reaching out to me yesterday. All my math buddies, all my chemistry buddies say, teach these kids some Excel because they're going to need it to be productive. You can't do too much Excel if there's an opportunity for them to practice with it.
Yeah, and I'd be with you on that. I've used Excel in classes too. I've also just used Google Sheets in classes just to get some very bare basics, just to get people excited about math. So either way, I feel like if they're not going to have any background in stats or math, if we're really going to take that seriously, or programming, then we're trying to think more about ways to do that and not scare them away, I guess.
I think this conversation's gone on at Savannah State, hasn't it? I mean, you've had some of these conversations about platform and technology.
Yeah, well, John, we're not trying to standardize the tools, right? We just
No. This is more of like
recommendations. Yeah.
I mean, a part of this conversation is really about what are you using, not what's best to use. I mean, and so I'll give an example from this morning, but UGA has moved towards JUMP. Well, you know, that's fine. UGA's got a different sort of culture, and they've got a different sort of community. They can support use of JUMP, and they can support actually a whole bunch of other things. Kennesaw State has made the decision to do this primarily through Excel with a little bit of R. And that's largely because they're looking towards, and it somewhat gets back to the conversations that Sebastian was noting, that business wants their students to have the earliest exposure to Excel. Like data science is great, but Excel is what they'll be using. And that means that they'll be seeing this for the second time when they get into a business class that involves accounting class, say, or something like that. All that's fine. There's no, and it actually has much more to do with your context. Like where is your faculty best suited? Where is your student body best seated? What is the tool that doesn't scare them away, but gives them a flavor for what this field is and allows them to do this in a way that's appropriate? So that's and actually, I think that's actually been the conversation they've been having at Savannah State, is like, where does this fit? Because they've got, I think it's, tell me if I'm wrong here, business, Homeland Security and Emergency Management, computer science, and somebody else is in your like steering committee on this?
Yes, somebody from education, somebody from urban data science, urban data analytics, and one from CISM, one from logistic data, and myself, yeah. So the issue, my concern is that, so we are trying to attract this student. Where do you want to send them? To data analytics job or something? Because we all are faculty members here, I'm assuming, and my real world data analytics experience is very low as far as I have learned from people. Is Excel used in real data world? That's my question.
Let me just pitch in an example on this. I was recently hired. I just recently got a contracting gig for this company to work on an Excel sheet for QA purposes. And well, I'm not going to give details on what they do, but QA is quality assurance. And they ship a product, and the technician takes a sample of that product on an Excel sheet. And if they make a typo, for example, purity level needs to be above 99.8%. And let's say that they put 9.98%, just a small typo. They send 20 tons of stuff across the country. Whoever gets that quality QA report will say, okay, we can't have 9.98% purity. They ship it back, okay? So they hired me to do something about this. So it turns out that they didn't know what conditional formatting was. There's also data integrity tools in Excel. So there's so many things that Excel is used for. There's a saying that business runs on Excel. Okay. That's very true. Okay. So this is part of why I'm sort of conflicted between Python and Excel, and that's where the decision to use both came from, part of where that came from. But I do think that Excel is extremely important.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's the intention for this class was never to kind of lead to the major. It was just basically supposed to be literacy course for students to be aware of how they could be maybe misguided with data science. What is data science, right? So it was very, very basic course. There's no expectations that they will be becoming data scientists or they should be doing this. And that's why we want to have so much flexibility to just make the kids aware of the concepts because of the data science becoming such a fundamental thing in our society. Mm-hmm. But there was no intention for this to be developed any further, I believe.
There must be tools in the data science world that require basically no programming. You upload a file, you hit a button that say clean the data, it shows you some inconsistencies, gives you some options. It presents.
There must be tools in art community than just do painting for you, right? Yes, they are. But the problem is when you think about specificity of the data and specificity of the problems, right? This tool becomes, oh, this is not what I need. I need a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more very, very quickly, right? There's not this trivialized ones, right? There are examples that many books use that could be kind of trivialized, but those are not really tools of, hey, clean me the data. Okay, then you would have to know what kind of errors are you expecting in the data. Is the range of the data, is the numeric values, is the missing data, is this misspelling, is this typos, etc., etc. Right? We're talking about thousands of types of errors. Yes, you could develop the tool like this, but this tool will run forever because then we'll be checking for all of those cases, right? So that's not there yet. Yeah. But looking at the simple examples, looking at the simple data set may be the way to kind of speed up the development of the course, right? When you say, hey, I'm not gonna do everything, I just want something very simple.
So
Yeah.
for that sort of question too, Nicole Carter, who's teaching this course at Kennesaw, gave us a little bit of a look into their planning on it and how they're sort of going to use a split model. I'm going to post that video this morning. She, I think, is available to share some of her stuff as well, and is welcome to. So I would, again, I would encourage you to take a look at it, because I think what she's doing, she's done it in Excel, but she's also got like side-along R programming examples to pull from, so that students who want to go deeper sort of along that line of like understanding it would be able to use it. And like I said, this is all, we're going to create a group. I'm going to make sure there's an email that everyone can get to everybody else, so you can see who else is in there. But it may be an interesting conversation to have as you build out your course, to see where they've gone. Camille Pace at Highlands is another person who's on this morning's call, who's done some work on that too. And she's doing it in R, so using tidyverse. And again, these are discrete things to help people see the data as they go through. And actually, I'm interested that, so really nobody here is thinking about R, which was what everyone this morning was talking about.
Well, I'm thinking.
We are thinking of using a little bit of R, especially, of course, in our 1401, we use R for statistics, but we are thinking of using a little bit of R as well, R, Python, and Excel. But generally speaking, we try to find examples from a variety of disciplines, examples from criminal justice, from medicine, from marketing, so that students can see the usefulness of data analytics, and and also it allows us to experiment with different techniques and data analysis techniques, data mining techniques, and so on and so on. So that is what we try to do, to use a variety of examples from different disciplines.
Yeah, one of the points I guess I was talking about these tools, like take for example, word clouds, right? It's a technique of data visualization. There are websites where you can just upload a file and it kind of does a little bit of auto cleaning and produces a word cloud. Zero technical requirements required besides clicking a couple things on a website. Do we develop a module around that? Do we say, hey, what can we learn from this word cloud? How does it represent real knowledge versus how does it mislead us? Is that the type of thing we want to do in this course? Or are we always starting in data and approaching the technical aspect?
That's a good question.
I think that perhaps both approaches might be good, because in certain instances you may not know exactly the convoluted logic behind the data analysis, but you just feed some data and get some result and you're satisfied with that. But in other circumstances you want to understand the process, and therefore you may require to go through a series of steps before you get your final output. So I think it depends on the situation, but you probably use a mixture of both approaches.
I'm starting to think that these are useful for motivational examples more so than what we typically call learning outcomes. Like what's a learning outcome? Where you design your syllabus, right? What is that? Well, it's something that the student shall know, or whatever the right verbiage is. But if, like, for example, would you consider Instagram filters one of those approaches viable? they're great at it. And let me tell you, like, they know how to do Instagram and all these other technologies super well. But do they know how they work? Is it useful to know how they work, or at least what they do? That there's like, 10,000 computers in some, desert facility crunching numbers. Is that useful to know? That's the question I think you're asking, right?
Yeah, I ran across a tool that did Twitter analysis, and it had,
Right.
all kinds of knobs that you could do to get a big AI cloud somewhere in the world working on a Twitter analysis for you.
Right.
And that's data science. It's just, you're not the one doing it. Someone else has already done it. You're trying to interpret results. And how much time do I want to allocate to these types of examples, which won't be fun for me to teach because I'd much rather teach programming.
Right.
But the students will say, wow, we did some really cool stuff. There's a big tool set out there. And maybe in the future, in another class, they'll be like, you know what, I could do a Twitter analysis on this topic.
To me, this class is more about more the understanding of the concepts, not necessarily this independence yet. I think especially for this kind of, hey, let me do this stuff on my own, you need some programming, and that's why I kind of think that for that low level, teaching them programming, especially kids who do not want to be taught programming, maybe just too much. And that's why, to me, Excel seems like a valid tool, right? It's like, I know I can do more, and I would recommend Python or R as programming languages, but then you have to introduce the concept of the data structure. You have to introduce the concept of the sequential programming, at least maybe some structures, etc., right? That can get out of hand very, very quickly. And you're gonna have 20 people that say, hey, my variable is not named correctly or stuff like this, and you're just debugging, and that's not scalable. And that's, become big obstacle very quickly. So this kind of maybe presentation for the examples, or look what this guys did, and that's how they messed this up, or look what this is, that's how, but you need to pay attention, maybe a better kind of scope for the class, approach for the class.
In my meeting with the advisors today, I had to kind of make the disclaimer that, hey, this isn't really data science. If you look on the DOL website, or BLS, whatever, Bureau of Labor Statistics, data scientists need a PhD. I mean, that's typical requirements for data scientists.
That's the biggest change of this course, right? Is watering this down for making this literacy, when really to make this,
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. So what we're doing really is a literacy course in data. And that includes analytics, which is looking at the past, and it includes data science, which is looking at the future. At least that's my understanding of it. So I want to hear more opinions.
So this morning's conversation, one of the things that they sort of discussed a little bit was the course. Again, this kind of gets back to what you've said about this. What is the purpose of the course? And it wasn't necessary to make them data scientists, because again, that's a long-term project. But to understand how a data scientist works, like to understand to walk through the process so that they understand. Again, part of this is to getting back to this idea they're going to encounter data across their lives, and they'll need to know both. How is that? Should I trust that analysis? Do I see in that analysis what I think I'm being showed? And also, how might this have been developed? So this idea of walking through this process of data science was really actually a sort of the way that they were thinking about structuring the works. It's not, again, about becoming one. It's about knowing what they do. And so there is this idea of defining what data is. How do you get data? How do you clean data? How do you assemble it and analyze it? And how do you present it and communicate it to audiences? All of which is fundamental to the process and has hierarchy in terms of of its sophistication, and can be done with a whole range of tools and a whole range of approaches, and as Dr. Aurora notes, a whole range of topics, a whole range of data sets. So we're coming to the end of our time. I did want to say two things. One, I forgot to introduce Bruce Van Dahl at the beginning. Bruce, some of you may have encountered earlier. Bruce is our consultant on some of the work we do around pathways and programs. So Bruce is here. He's the one person who hasn't talked yet. Yeah, so I guess the questions are remaining. I mean, the technology is an unsettled thing, and I think you should feel confident settling for technology that works for your implementation. I want to be very clear, we are not looking for consistency. If you're able to deliver this entirely in Python, or entirely in Excel, or a mixture of the two, or entirely in online tools. I mean, it would actually be kind of exciting to see if this could be done through online tools, because students would have access to those in ways that they may not have access to them. I guess Collab is probably going to work on a Chromebook. But one of the things you always worry about is like the Chromebooks not necessarily always having the full service.
No, because that runs on the cloud, so that's not an issue.
Right. The other question that came up, and it may be premature here, but we had a discussion earlier about like texts and resources, and so there's some of that may just be premature for y'all to think about. But has anybody come across any either textbooks or teaching resources, particularly free OER resources, but other resources as well that would support the course?
No, but my department head encouraged me to make one.
Well, then we'll count on that. So next year, so by fall of 2022, perhaps when most of us are implementing the course, we can just go ahead and look for that in Merlot.
Maybe.
No, but you shared with us, right? You shared the resources that you found.
Yeah,
before, right?
so after COVID, I used to have a website where I'd make everything public, and COVID hit, and USG had this bright idea to police people who use BlazeView. And if you didn't use BlazeView, D2L, whatever their platform, and people who didn't use it got a slap on their hand. Hey, you're not doing your work. Well, I did it on my own webpage. So then after that, I gave up on this idea of like transparency. So, but yes, I will make that public, and I will put it on the webpage. All my assignments, everything.
One of the things I love about teaching programming is the automatic grading and feedback you can set up for students. So I'd be interested in any assignments for this course, be they in Excel or other tools, where a student can automatically check their work and get feedback and get it right before I have to grade it. So I can just say, yep, it's 100.
There's a lot of tools like that. I can link you to some.
Yeah, if you can share that out with me as well, I'll share it out to the full group. That would be great. Well, this has been great. We are at time. If you have unless you have other last minute thoughts, I'm going to summarize our conversation, this morning's conversation, into sort of a stack. These recordings will both be available as a link off from YouTube. Again, this has been useful for me. I hope it's been useful for you. I will be connecting everybody in the development community so that you can see each other and share resources with each other, and get to know one another. Appreciate all the work on this. And as you go forward, if you have questions, or if you have insights, or if you have decisions that get made, or questions particularly about the process going forward, please shoot me an email. I'd appreciate it. Otherwise, have a great rest of your afternoon, and we'll talk soon. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.